I just assumed you was more of a grappler.
No,
I've watched a couple of your fights, and there was a lot of like of half guard.
Yeah, because they were putting me on my back.
Right, okay.
They were shooting in on me.
Right,
but I would never. I was very rarely initiating the grappling. I was big on fucking up the legs and.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I beat better strikers than myself because of.
I think you said you did a bit of taekwondo or something, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I was like an English champion back years and years ago, in the late 1990s. But I went into and done a bit of pro Thai.
Okay.
And as well, that helped me understand about the physical condition. Yeah, under Lee Asdal. And I hated it. Right. I didn't get the concept of it because I went from doing taekwondo, which is all points based, like hit, don't get hit, to Thai boxing. You stand in front of each other and you let them throw hits and you just block them. And
I can't stand Thai boxing.
Yeah, it's fucking weird.
Yeah.
And so it was the opposite mentality, but it helped me learn about conditioning the body. And but my love was MMA because it's the closest to the street.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of doing no rules, like literally. But you can't literally do that because you can't have a career in it.
Yeah, and you can't make it a sport because no one's going to sanction it either.
No, that's right. So I really like the idea of it being as close to no rules as possible.
Yeah, that's what I always say to everyone who, like, I was actually talking to my mate about this the other day. Like, I could never just do kickboxing or just do jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Like, I enjoyed just training those individual arts, but I could never only do one. Because I feel like I'm leaving so much on the table.
It depends what you're in it for. I mean, some people hate grappling. I get that. Yeah. But I'm the same as you. I was kind of like, I do love it all individualistically. But I'm even training weapons. I like training a bit of weapons. And I know a lot of it is like, in a real situation, you throw it all away. But I find the concept, I like the thinking behind it. MMA is not black and white. You've got to have black and white segments to the techniques. It's got to be structured a certain way. But then the expression of it and how you apply it in reality, it all depends on their energy levels, your energy levels, how sweaty they are. There's a lot of things surrounding around that technique that are not black and white.
Yeah.
So when you do a DAS, you can do it completely technically fine, but how about when your heart rate's racing at 160, 170? How about when you're under pressure? You got blood over him, over you. You're both sweating because it's a fifth round. Things like that. That totally changes how you can apply a DAS.
Yeah. And, we can just. I'm recording, so we can just roll.
Oh shit! Sorry,
we can just roll straight in from here because I'm actually really interested about this.
Yeah.
There's Have you heard the whole? I think they call it. Having a mental blank here. Like live training.
Yeah.
Where it's like game-based, constraint-led something. Basically, it's all game-based training, all live work. Have you heard about this at the moment? It's like a big trend.
It might be the way we're doing things, but we call it something. I call it, if it's the same thing, we call it situational sparring.
Yeah. So like, for example, on Friday night, that's what you do in the MMA class, right? Yeah. Exactly like that, essentially. Right. Say in jiu-jitsu, instead of doing a technique of you get your underhook and then maybe you go for like trying to swim around, take the back, or you try and do a roll or whatever. Instead of that, what they do is we're starting in half guard. Your only goal is to get an underhook. As soon as you get that, reset and you win that little mini game and you go again. But the other person's job might be to get chest to chest and just pin you flat.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's essentially, it sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, this is how Hickson was originally training. He would do his training where he would be in every single bad position, and that would be how he started sparring. Right. The worst type of back take position, the worst type of side control. You can have like positive and negative half guard being underneath, negative where your arms are disengaged, it's just your legs holding the half guard, you're being pinned on your back, and then he'd work and escape and attack, therefore, and counter attack from there. So they've been doing it for donkey's years. But to me, there's two things that we work on particularly, and we've just done it through evolution and trying to come up with new ideas, keep freshening our thoughts on things and don't be stuck in a rut. We try not to crystallize our methods. Right. We try to manipulate and change, and sometimes we change things and we think we have to disregard it after a while, but then we sometimes change and we go like, we've noticed a difference, this is working better. So one of these things is, so situational can be both done technically, so you can put yourself in bad positions and try and escape. That's like working a technical aspect of a situation. Okay, you've been side controlled, you've got to get out from side control. And then the situational that we work, particularly say for MMA, is on a Wednesday, we don't do 5-minute rounds, we do 3. And the situational circumstance of that remaining 3 minutes is you've lost really badly the first 2 minutes. and both of you are starting that 3-minute round with that in your mind, you both are losing. I know you can only have one, but scenario-wise, you've both got to be having in your mind, I'm 2 minutes in, I'm really badly behind, I need to win this last 3-minute big to take back this round.
Okay.
So it should be a much more intense 3-minute round because it's the second half of the segment. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we can also do situational, technically, where I'll be like, okay, so normally if you're on your back in MMA, most of the time if the fight's fairly even, you're looking to come off your back. You shouldn't be looking for submissions, really, unless one really presents itself. But it's so hard to do that this day and age with the climate of MMA. So I'd be like, most of the time you'll be trying to escape. I'm like, but what happens if this is the final round where you've lost all the rounds and you're on your back again? I said, that's when you have to kind of go subs. There's no point wrestling up to your feet because it's just not the right situation anymore. So I said, it's then that all your no-gi training comes in. You're going to have to take risks to get thumped in the head to try to go to your K-guard, to present a leg lock, and so on and so forth. The style of MMA totally changes depending on the circumstantial need.
Okay, so what is your opinion on like pure just drilling then? No resistance, just pure drilling.
Yeah, I think drilling is really, really good to learn the steps of any technique or the chain of any combination of techniques. So you can have, you can go from one submission to another submission. You can go from one submission attempt, they defend it, and then it can present a position exchange that puts you in an even better position. So I'm all down for doing those drills because I think it helps you do things instinctually. I'm down for a bit of that, but then it has to move on. You have to pressure performance test those techniques and scenarios, and that's when you bring the situational technique and the situational circumstance into the equation along with those techniques.
Okay, yeah, because I'm having a lot of like debates with people at the gym that I train at the moment of like, oh, should we go 100% just like games-based stuff and no drilling at all? But then the problem that I'm seeing is that, like, even with myself, where the other day we was doing a game based around finishing an arm in guillotine, I realised that I've got an awful arm in guillotine, and that's where I needed some guidance of like, okay, make this adjustment, and actually be taught a little bit more in depth about an arm in guillotine. Versus just doing a game for the sake of doing a game. So I'm sort of struggling at the moment with like how much to do. I've kind of settled on that like 80-20. 80% games, 20% drilling. I don't know if you feel that's a fair amount.
The key to all of these ideas, because they're all ideas, all theories of thought of how you should prep and train your students or train yourself to become the most proficient as quickly as possible. And I think it's all about balance. Have you got a drill to a point? Well, how are you going to learn the steps towards a submission or a sweep or a scramble up? To me, we break them down into 5 functional steps to make anything work. It doesn't matter whether it's a punching technique, a kicking technique, a wrestling technique. You need a breakdown of 5 elements to make it functional. And you could break down into more as you want to get more complex into the detailing and the nuances of any individual technique. So of course you can break it down into more. But you have to do drilling to become proficient at those steps. And so I'm all for a bit of drilling. Of course that's how it starts at the most basic level. You get taught the process steps to the technique, or you get taught once you've got those techniques down, say of a chain of 3 positions and submissions, and then you can therefore drill the whole sequence. Just like learning an individual jab, an individual cross, an individual uppercut and a hook, then you can put them in a sequence of combination and jostle each of those individual striking techniques to change your striking combination, even though it's the same 4 techniques.
I think maybe it's just like a bit of new trends and people trying to be like, oh, this is super cool. Like,
sometimes what can happen with some young coaches, I guess, and some young gyms that perhaps miss the point of things, you can get a trend of training that they may have seen, they may have heard about, and then they can like become obsessed with it. It's a little bit like a new gi design that comes out, I guess, and then someone famous wears it and wins in the tournament with it, and then everyone wants that gi, and you buy everything with that kit. You know what I mean?
I think not Farasahabi, the guy who is sort of leading the whole constraint-led training thing is a guy called Greg Saunders, I think.
Okay.
And he actually did a podcast with Farasahabi. And obviously Farasahabi's like a very one of the best coaches in the world, right? And comes from a lineage of like John Danaher and all that lot. And Faraz Zahabi was still saying like, no, if someone doesn't know how to do a double leg, they need to be shown the fundamentals of how to do a double leg.
Yeah,
you know?
There's no real way around that in terms of efficiency of improving someone. Of the quickest order. You've got to start off with something fundamental. You've got to start off with the blacks and whites of the technique. The steps, and then after that you can talk about the nuances of just what we were talking about earlier, of fatigue, trying to do a technique when you're fatigued. That totally changes how you apply things. And that's the difference, I think. Someone who's a specialist, say, in no-gi, that's really quite a top-tier grappler that comes over to MMA and then they can't pull none of what they normally do off because they're fatigued before they even hit the mat. And this is what a lot of, say, grapplers don't even understand. Or even just a pure wrestler coming over to do MMA and they've got all the stress of someone that knows how to anti-wrestle in terms of their angles, distancing, and they've got flack, meaning strikes coming at them. The pressure totally changes for a wrestler, and then they can then feel exhausted because it's not quite the same sport of wrestling. Do you know what I mean?
It does go, even something like the factor of the smaller gloves completely changes it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you're just doing stand-up in smaller gloves, no grappling involved, that completely changes the stand-up as well. You just can't take the same, you can't block the same.
When you're wearing big boxing gloves, you can just sit tight with a double frame, double block like this. You can't have that luxury in an MMA glove.
Okay, so what do you believe is the difference between a fighter and a martial artist?
Okay, so a fighter is not just trying to improve their technique. They've got to be conditioned. They've got to learn about dietary needs because they're at the top tier of being an athlete. When you're just being a martial artist in the literal sense, there's a broad spectrum of people that might do that. Some people that just have a pure interest. So you can have people training weapons and they've got a little bit of a pot belly on them, but their knowledge would have you think that they're a master of the art. And indeed, they may well be in terms of the construct of the information that's available into an individual martial art. But that certainly doesn't mean that they're equipped to be in a combat arena. So someone that's being a true fighter is a combination, of course, being a martial artist in their approach to technique. I'm big on that. I want to keep my traditional roots of thinking and my approach of techniques and styles as being martial art orientated. But then you've got to learn about the dietary needs, the health factors, and now such a big thing in the sport at the top tier of combat sports is the mentality state. Some people are not equipped to deal with their inner nerves, and it can dissolve their performance. Both in the expression of cardio, they can be an incredible athlete in the gym, but under pressure they get fatigued because they're uptight. There's so much more involved to being a fighter, really, especially in this day and age. I think back in the early days, you could get away with having reasonable technique and just being a tough motherfucker. But it's beyond that now.
Yeah, you had a quote which I actually wanted to read out to you, which was, "It's great to be a natural fighter, but I don't want anyone making a career out of being tough. I want you to always be a martial artist before you have to be a fighter. When you have to be a fighter, of course, being that fighter and being that warrior is great. But until then, always be a martial artist."
Yeah, you've got to start off with being a martial artist. And it's a little bit like we was talking about, with do you drill or do you not drill? I think you've got to drill to learn the steps. You've got to start somewhere, and that has to be structured. And then all the nuances that come off there, that's when things get really interesting, or you go into the grayer areas or the expressionative areas. And what I mean by that is one fight camp might be going around a certain dietary need, and another fight camp would be like, we do it slightly like this. They're different on nuanced levels. And the way they do their strength and conditioning program might be slightly different to how we choose to do it. We might be big on running and road work, and another one might be big on doing gym work. Another one might be a combination of both and do HIIT style training. And so this is what I love about fight teams. We've all got these massive array of techniques, both defensive, countering and attacking in the realm of MMA, but then the way you express it is really down to the coach and the style of the gym, and of course how you choose and what nutritionists you bring in. And not all nutritionists fit so well with individual fighters. Sometimes that diet just don't work well for that guy, and that's the beauty of it. It's
what I find interesting is that everyone, so I go around to a lot of gyms because of what I do,
Yeah.
And everyone thinks they're the best, which I find it great. Obviously, you're going to think you're the best, but I find it just so interesting how everyone's like, no, this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
It's quite from the outside looking in, going into the different gyms, I'm like, oh, I hear this at every gym, and it's great that everyone thinks they're the best, and you have to believe that you're doing it the best, right?
Do you mean as a coach, as a team?
As a team, yeah, like everyone's like, oh, we're the best.
So as soon as you think you're the best, you've already lost. You're already not the best.
If you think you're the best.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
Because, where's the drive to evolve and continue to be better? The fact of the matter is, you can have a fighter that 9 times out of 10 might be over another fighter, or a team over another team. But there's that one night when you can just underperform, and so sometimes some of it's down to how things fall on the night. We were touching on things can happen in a fighter's life that can be consequential to how they perform on that night. You could be getting a divorce, or all sorts of things. You could have a death in the family, and there's so many things to how a fight performance can play out that can be affected from the outside in.
I think you must need a little bit of thinking that you're the best, though, surely.
Yes, right. I think to know that you're the best that you can be, and you can go in there confident that you've put in the work, you've got great coaching. When you become aware that you're in a very, very good team, of course that's going to give you a lot of confidence. But you're not really classed as anything as the best until you are, in terms of being, say, UFC champion. Then I suppose you've got some kind of argument to say, hey, I'm the best. But, I even think today, a fighter don't just want to be the best, they want to be the GOAT. They want to have a historic statement. I think that's what people want. I mean, fighters come and go, and it's got to a point now where champions can come and go. I mean, if you hold that belt and then you lose it for the next fight and you never get back up to that, I mean, you could kind of get forgotten. Yes, you're in history, but you're no one that spoke about much. But I think if you win that title numerous times, or you keep that title for a very long period, I think you get spoken about, and you get stamped in history where you get talked about as an example.
That's becoming harder to do, though. If someone gets 3 title defenses now, everyone's like, oh, this guy's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, whereas in the past, I don't know how many Adesanya had. I want to say it's like 6, maybe 7, something like that. But even that's unheard of now. Yeah. And then you've got people like GSP who had, was it 11 or 12 or something like that, Yeah. That just seems untouchable at this point.
Yeah. The climate is very, very difficult to stay on top as number one for any length of time. It's just, there's so many people out there that are incredible athletes, incredible fighters, and there's so many good gyms now. Remember, everything's increasing because the financial benefit is increasing. It's still way behind boxing, but the financial gain is increasing. Of course, the interest will therefore increase, and you're going to have more gyms, more teams, more fighters, and of course the trying to get to number one's going to be harder because you're going to have more people to face up against. I think the same could be said, say, with 100 meters. We've got England. It's quite a small island, really. It's not very often you'll ever hear about England having the fastest 100-meter sprinter because we don't have such a big pool of athletes. Then America quite often, or Jamaica, they're quite big in investing into their athletic team, and so they have more athletes coming through so you can have a bigger pick of the potentials. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
If you've got 100 fighters, you stand a better chance of finding that standout fighter than you have if you've got 10.
Right?
Yeah. It's ups your percentage chances of success.
That's why Russia has so many good MMA fighters, because they've got so many people in their country.
Yeah.
And it's sort of embedded within them. All right, I want to talk a little bit about your relationship with hard work, because I think like a lot of people, when they I've got a few people who don't do the sport and they message me and they talk about like getting into the sport, and I've got certain mates who are like, oh, I'm going to be a UFC champion, and then they train like once a week. Can you talk about the importance of hard work, not even just in the sport, but in anything that you want to do in life?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be successful at things, you've got to put in the time. And it's not even just putting in time, you've got to be productive with that. There's no point hanging around a gym, for 10 hours a day and not making good use of that time, and you're chatting after time or on your phone after. I see it all the time in the gym. I'll be seeing some people that have been in the gym for years and their physical condition hasn't changed at all because You know, they're building biceps on their thumbs on their phone.
Yeah.
And people sit there on their phones. It's unbelievable. Honestly, you should be putting your phones to one side and getting the most out of the time that you're in any one gym. Because I think it's equally important to have time away from the gym, particularly if you're a fighter. I don't think you should be, you would hear back in the past people living at the gym and they make great fighters, and then people think that's what you have to do. No, it's about being super productive with the quality of the time that you're in the gym. You know,
that's a really interesting. I actually had that on my notes to talk about, which is taking a break from. I had it just as martial arts, but like any kind of pursuit that you're going after relentlessly.
Yeah.
And actually stepping away from it sometimes to realize, like, oh, I do love that. Because sometimes, like, even doing this, there's been points where I've been, oh, fucking hell, I've got to do a podcast, you know. And I love doing this. I love having a chat, and I love the whole process of uploading it and making cool thumbnails and everything. But then, like, over December/January, I went to Australia for a month. I just had a month where I did fucking nothing.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. I came back and I felt so refreshed, and I felt so refocused on what I wanted.
Yeah.
And before I went, I was kind of doing the thing that I loved, but I kind of forgot that I loved it, if that made sense.
Yeah.
It was quite bizarre.
Yeah. I think it's slightly different in what you're doing. You can get away with though, that you're not going to lose no condition from it. You know, and you're not breaking a habit. It's still something that you're going to go back to. But with some fighters, with some mentalities, they can go and then they might not ever come back if they have that. So I'm all for taking time out, but I mean like taking time out as a day here, a day there. You know, if you really want to make it as a fighter, you ain't gonna wanna take a break, because also the window of opportunity in terms of your the length of your athletic peak is quite small, really, in terms of trying to make it.
You do have a time limit.
Yeah, you do have a time limit, and for most of us, you know, sometimes we have that team. Sometimes you've got the right connections to get into, say, UFC or all these other big paying promotions. You can just have good connections, but for the most part, it takes a good number of years to get up to a point to get accepted in, and then you're already approaching the twilight years for some people. And so, you know, you've really got to. You just got to work hard while you can. If you're going to do a physical job, do it while you're young. Don't be a groundsman or, you know, be a general builder in your 50s and 60s, because it's going to feel like damn hard work, you know. To have a fight career, you're not going to start it in your 30s. It's becoming unheard of today.
Yeah, I guess relating what I was saying to a fight career does change it, but I mean, obviously, I'm not asked about competing. So for me, like, to take a month off of, you know, I still went to the gym like once a week and lifted weights, hit the bag a little bit.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, as a pure martial artist, sometimes it is just nice to take a little period.
Yeah.
And go
on a holiday by all means. I mean, Reece Teasdale just recently, he took himself off to Ireland for the week. Yeah. And you know, as a coach, I'm down for that course. You know, you've got to have time out in that way, but I think if you're getting into habits of wanting to take time out, and you're like, oh yeah, training camp's really been hard, and you know, I'm very much against this because I was never like it. Perhaps I should be a little bit more forgiving, but I find it really frustrating that fighters will have a fight and then you won't see them for literally a month, and then they slowly trickle back into the gym, and again, they're not making use of their time when they're in the gym. They're sort of like in there to talk about their fight, and they're not really listening in the class no more. Do you know what I mean? And to me, they're just running out of time. It's going to make it slower for them to keep learning. I think if you're going to be successful today, I'm really talking about MMA ultimately. It's such a broad spectrum of technical attacks that you have to learn. There's such a broad spectrum from therefore to defend against all these potential attacks. And then there's tactics that are involved. And then there's just so much to learn. You know, don't take no longer than a week off at a time. And then when you do get back in hard. So I do get frustrated with fighters not staying on the learning curve because there's so much to learn. There really is.
There's a guy called Ed. I can't remember I can't pronounce his last name. 6'10", just fought on. He's came here a couple of times.
Black lad.
Yeah, I think it's 6'10".
6'10". Yeah, nice lad.
Yeah. And I think he's had 5 fights this year already. Yeah, and we're just about to turn May.
Yeah.
And he fought on Cage Warriors Academy last weekend, I think.
Yeah.
And then he was back in the gym.
Yeah,
Literally the next day, I think.
Yeah.
And like that is a really cool attitude to see.
It is.
And
it is.
Someone like that is sure you can't not be successful.
Yeah.
If that's your attitude.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and attitude is massively important, and coaches are searching for that attitude. To be anything in terms of being a fighter of any note today, you've got to be fairly smart. You can't be stupid. You've got to have some kind of stability in your life as a whole. We all have things that happen in our lives. We can't control absolutely everything. We all go through difficulties outside that can affect our careers in fight. I get that, but you want to have some kind of stability. You've got to have some kind of athletic gift in some way. I'm not talking about heavyweights here, but generally for the masses. And you've got to have a great coach. You've got to have a great team, because a team ain't a coach. To really succeed, you want to have your high students trickling down their knowledge too, so you have a team of coaches. Does that make sense? I'm very much against a coach sitting at the top, not liking anyone else spreading information. I get my students teach me stuff all the time.
Yeah.
One of them, John Lewis, is an incredible grappler. He wants to make it bigger than the grapple weight. He's just beginning to make noises now. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No.
Not particularly big guy, sits around 70 kilos. He tried his hand at MMA, didn't quite work for him. But the grappling, and this guy just indulges in trying to get that knowledge. I was going through techniques the other day, showing through stuff in my class, actually this week. And I know it's the style of game that he likes. I don't know the names of all these techniques, but he's saying, oh, that's an inside ashy this, and but could you name a name that? So he's big on the labeling of names. To me, I just have structured shapes in my head of how they link together. I don't work on labels or names of things. And but he's telling me the names of things. But he gave me some really good details on how you finish things. I'm like, oh, I do struggle here to sometimes get the finish. My hips are hampered in this particular position. He goes, oh no, you've got to position the foot here. And I love that. I love it when I see the top end students passing down what they know and also sharing it with their coach. I think they're the teams that can also show through when so many other good teams are out there. I think the ones that got that little edge, the ones that show through to the top that little more often, are the ones that have got a team of coaches, and it ain't just that one insecure coach at the top making it all about him.
Yeah, there's it's one of the most beautiful things about martial arts, isn't it? Like, you can get someone who is nowhere near as good as you at 95% of the rest of the sport that you're doing at the time, whether it's MMA or jiu-jitsu or kickboxing or any other ones, but they can show you that little 5% that you don't know, or even if it's like a 0.5%, and then you can take that and add that to your game. And it's for me, when I started martial arts, I wanted to get into it because I wanted to be like this cool fighter and impress fucking girls and look good on Instagram, And now I do that anyway. But
I think we all have a little bit of that, yes.
Yeah, but like, as I quickly realised, that it's about so much more than that. It's about like the community that you can build and the relationships that you can build, and then relaying what you learn in the martial arts and on the mats over into day-to-day life as well.
Yeah.
And for me, that's like that's the message that I'm trying to spread to people who maybe don't do martial arts at the moment. It's like, when you get into it, it's about so much more than just the punches and the kicks.
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. Absolutely is. It's a whole lot deeper than that. And we touched on the psychology of what it's all about as well. And it's to prepare. Some people are just natural performers. So we got one of them, and you don't see it very often, but it just falls on your lap. Marion is a natural performer. What do I mean by that? He could spar in the club. He's an extremely good striker. I'm on about. Extremely good striker before he even come over to MMA. He just needed to be taught how to adapt it to stay on his feet so he don't get taken down. So he had to learn and understand about the anti-wrestling aspects. But he's someone that could lose quite a few rounds even with some of the top amateurs, because he ain't going full contact. He knows what his potential is on the feet. And for him to be truly effective with his striking, he would have to go full contact with it. But he doesn't. He pushes at a 60, 70% clip, and he can therefore get taken down by a top amateur that's wrestling heavy. And he can lose around here and there. But he's an absolute natural fighter. On the fight day, must have some form of nerves, I guess will, but he deals with them so well, and he actually does a thing called overperforming. Okay. So on that fight day, he overperforms beyond what we see in the gym. We know what it's capable of in the gym, don't get me wrong, because I can see that potentiality, but it's expressed fully on fight day, and that's incredible. But for the most part, for most athletes, they end up underperforming in some way, even with their emphatic looking wins. I can see that underperforming because the pressure got at them. And this is the other part that can quite often go untalked about, which is a real difficult with coaches and relationships with students, is trying to make them do their pressure performance rounds.
Right, okay.
Yeah, because...
Is that like the hard sparring rounds? Is that what you're talking about?
When I say hard, it doesn't have to be physically hard in terms of like battery physically hard, but physically hard where you're exchanging a lot of techniques because you're actually trying to beat each other.
Right.
Because some people have so much ego that they don't want to be put in a pecking order. You know, I say get in that pecking order and try and climb. Use that to try and climb. There's nothing better than being in a gym where you are not quite the best, but you know you're on the up. That expression of knowing that you're going to be better, and you, oh my goodness, I won a round off Jordan today. Because you know your hard graft and you know, I think that's good to you know, it's a little bit like ground racing. You've got the hair, isn't it? And you're chasing it. I think it's good to have someone to chase. And then you should see it, certainly if you're in the top in the gym, you want to see it that you want to keep everyone under check, you know. It's like a lion and his pride. You've got to keep everyone in check.
What about the person who is at the top? What do they do?
Well, like I say, you're kind of like the head of the pride, aren't you? And
yeah, but I mean, like, so you were saying about it's good to know you're not the best, but know that you're on the up?
Yes. Yeah.
What about when you are the best person in that gym?
Yeah, okay, so you're normally in a pecking order on the fight stats, you know, you're normally on a ranking, aren't you?
Yeah.
So they still have a ladder they're climbing.
Yeah.
So there's a gym ladder and then there's the real ladder.
Right, okay, yeah.
I think you should get used to climbing that gym ladder. It's a little bit like, you know, they soften kids in schools. Everyone's a winner. Everyone gets a gold badge. Everyone gets a medal. Don't like that sort of thing. Learn to have a pecking order. I think as long as you're being the best you could be, it's like with my fight career, I wanted to be the best I could be ultimately. And if that meant fifth best, I'm happy with that. You know, I want to be the best, but if I know I've just done everything I possibly can and there was someone just better than me, I absolutely respect them. And I'll be like, wow, you know, I gave it my all. But I think there's something good in that drive to be you know, best you can be. And you can only be doing that if you face truth. And facing truth is to experience the pressure rounds. Because trust me, you don't want to learn to deal with pressure on the job because you're going to get your losses. You know, you don't want to be getting your losses as you learn. I mean, you do because, you know, most fight careers you experience loss. But I say get those pressure rounds in. And that's why I'm big on competing in no-gi wrestling tournament. Man, do them in between camps because it keeps you chasing knowledge in the individual arts. We talked about doing individual martial arts such as kickboxing, wrestling. I think it's great to do a wrestling tournament. Vinny's a great example. He went and done the Snake Pit wrestling championship, but they have some submissions in it, but it's ultimately just wrestling. And he goes and does that. He got silver and went up some damn good, you know, world-class wrestlers there. That's great for your pressure performance. And so sometimes I do have a battle with fighters. We had a little bit of a mutiny years ago where we had some coaches leave, and these coaches that left, I mean, they weren't top tier coaches. They was, you know, learning the coaching industry, thought they knew it all. This is where you go down to thinking you're the best. They thought they knew better. They broke away. Their team's totally fallen apart because the only fighters they took with them are the other ones that were calling the shots on their own career, started fighting out of their weight, taking fights against people that complete bums. So they're not progressing their skill set. They're just kidding themselves. And not to pick names, although I'd love to. One of them's got like three world titles at a weight he shouldn't be fighting at, but he's never fought a guy with a positive record. And yet certain fight promotions, because he's a big ticket seller, will take him on. They would adhere to his demands and wants because he brings bums on seats for these smaller amateur shows. And he's fighting on these amateur shows where they do feature pro fights. And he's having his fight career on there. And it's just... But this fighter's going nowhere because whenever
and it's not truth.
No, it's not truth. And this is the beauty of the sport of MMA. You know, it's an arena of truth. How I'm coaching, how the fighter is embracing the coaching, how he's willing to be diligent about his diet is all going to be presented on the performance of the day. And if you're missing anything, it could show itself up even in victory. So this is what I mean. Sometimes I see my fighters get wins and I'll be like, listen, man, your chin was drifting up. You was nervous in that striking. We've got to get you comfortable when you're striking. I had a discussion. I'm happy to mention his name. Vinny, who I just spoke about, he just said, hey, I've got a plan. I'm going to have 2 more fights. They're already booked in. I really want to push to maybe pre-pro at the end of the year. What do you think? I said, the truth is, Vinny, when you're an amateur, it's about me feeling like everything's getting ready to touch on a performance of pressure as a pro. So you're not crumbling on the feet with the striking. You're not thinking, oh, I'm up against a wrestler, and you're just trying to purely defend and you're abandoning your attacks. So the best way to deal with a wrestler is to attack them in the correct way with your striking. Push a wrestler backwards. Never let a wrestler dominate middle or edge you back, because they've got trajectory and it pushes you towards the cage. It's not a good idea. Once you've got all those things in place, then we can start talking about you being pro. You've got to be pressure tested in every part of the arena that MMA offers. And that's how I work things. There's no point. You wouldn't want to hang on to a chain hanging off a cliff if you add one rusty link or one cracked link. The rest of the chain could be... Don't go pro until you feel like you've got everything in order, because you will be exposed.
That's interesting. That chain link thing's interesting. Yeah. That can apply to anything, can't it? Where like you're kind of looking at the rest of this chain that you've got. It's like, oh, isn't that good? And you know that missing link is there. And
you want to ignore it. You're like, oh, pretend it ain't there.
It's actually the hard thing to do, but the right thing to do is to look at that and be like, no, we need to sort that one out.
And this is a battle between coach and fighters. Some of these fighters will almost push it so deep in their subconscious that are avoiding doing what they need to do to become the best that they can be. And they'll fight. We've got a percentage of narcissism in us. But my goodness, sometimes it presents itself, and they're so narcissistic with their opinion back at you, and they make all these excuses around that. Oh no, I'm not right. That's not how I work. I don't like that. That'll make me fight less good if I'm getting broken in training. I'm not saying to be broken in training. You've got to face the pressure. You keep picking people 2 weights smaller than you, and that amateur's your pro, and you should be getting in there with him because he's a better striker than you. And I know you're not always comfortable with your striking. Things like that. So it's sometimes quite hard to get certain fighters facing the truth and reality of the discomfort of being a fighter.
Can you get people to do it if they don't want to do it? Have you ever managed to do that?
Yeah. But sometimes you don't, and hence we had this mutiny. I was upsetting some guys, and me and my other coach Raymond. Raymond's more bullying in his approach. That's probably the wrong term.
Raymond's a scary dude.
yeah, because he don't show much emotion, but and so it can come across a bit blunt. And he'll just tell you how it is. He doesn't dance around and dress it up nice. Whereas sometimes I can be brutal at my times, but I'll have a little tongue in cheek as I say it. But I'm getting my message over to you. He just comes out and says it in conversation. You're overweight. You're not big enough. You're overweight. Your frame. You've got to. If you're not this weight in a month's time, I ain't getting you a fight. That's how he works.
It's good to have a bit of both though, right?
Exactly. That's why me and Raymond work so well, I think, as coaching. He's a little bit more socially introverted. I'm over-expressionative of that. And so sometimes I'll lose my way and get over socializing in my class. And he's like, Danny, don't forget, you've got to do another technique. So we kind of like, and I tell him to lighten up at times, and we create a nice balance together, I think.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about like going after something really difficult, because I feel like that's what MMA is. Like, it's one of the most difficult things that you can do as a human. There was a quote. Do you know who Sam Sulek is?
No.
He's like this big bodybuilder dude. He kind of made it to the pinnacle of bodybuilding,
right.
In the modern era, not like the Arnold era. Yeah. But he had this quote, which was, "So many people could have done so many more awesome things if they just did what they wanted to do instead of following the beaten path."
Right.
How can you relate to that as like a martial artist and a former fighter and now a top coach as well?
Yeah. So the way I would read into my situation as being a coach is like, if I only got the training program of American Top Team and I just mimic it, I'm going to do okay because I'm mimicking it. But it's their program they're working on. They might have already been working on that program for 15 years. They've got fighters that have been doing it since a kid that are now breaking through into fight. If I just apply that same, I'm sort of like chasing down the same path, but 10 years behind. Do you kind of know what I mean? So the way I look at it, and I explain to my fighters all the time, is to be always constantly malleable to new information coming in and new ideas. I think if you really want to be a standout fighter or a standout gym, not only have you got to defend against what the trends are, all these new attacks, Islam come up with a new style of dance, like short dance, and you get things that come into fashion. Of course, you've got to prepare for those and learn to defend against them. But certainly in terms of counter-attacking and attacking, you've got to come up with new expressive ways that have not been seen before. So they're a surprise and a shock. I think a good idea to look at this back in history, and a lot of people wouldn't have even heard of him anymore, but Sakuraba, he was doing something that was never seen before. He was really over-amplifying the leg kicks back in a time way before Jose Aldo brought in the fashion of leg kicking and calf kicking. He was hacking at the legs on these jiu-jitsu specialists, and then he was giving the backup. Do you remember? He'd become the Gracie killer. Oh, so you haven't even heard of Sakuraba?
I've heard of a name, but I don't know the real details.
Look at his fights. He was the first one to beat the Gracies. I mean, in the beginning era of UFC, it was all about Royce and Hicks and Gracie. They were the massive names in MMA as it was back then. And then, of course, this Sakuraba come by and started beating all the Gracies. Renzo Gracie, I think he was a great martial artist and a great advocate for MMA, that he came over from BJJ and didn't believe in only BJJ. He was a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioner that could strike some and he could wrestle some. He didn't rely purely on his grappling skills. Well, he desiccated Renzo Gracie's arm, and this guy is like a world champion jiu-jitsu practitioner. And this Sakuraba with Japanese catch wrestling style was defeating, submitting, and just dissolving all these Gracies. So he was coming up with things that had never been seen before. And I think there's still room for expressions of ideas and theories. And not all of them are going to work well, not all of them are going to be correct. But I think if you're keeping an open mind and trying to think out the box, you're going to be able to get your guys to come up and perform something that's never been seen before. And it could be on that night of a title fight.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is literally exactly what you're talking about, like Islam with its choke.
Yeah.
That was literally exactly what you're talking about there. In a title fight, I can't remember, was it Moicano who got that one?
I believe, yeah.
But at the highest level of the sport, and he's done something which is like kind of new. It's probably been done before. People have probably done it in the gym before.
But largely,
most martial arts is that.
Not prepared for. It wasn't to be expected.
Yeah. I actually had a really interesting conversation with Jordan when he fucked me up for that video. We was talking a little bit about his striking and how. So I asked him, where did you get your striking from? And he was like, I just kind of, it's my own expression. Like I didn't really I haven't been to a specific place. It's kind of a bit of self-taught, a bit of picked up from here and there.
Yeah.
And it's just like a natural expression, but it's, in my opinion, quite a unique style of striking.
Yeah.
Like what makes him unique and stands out a bit as a fighter is a bit of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting thing to see that. And I think there is a risk at the moment with MMA of people like copy and paste, and even in jiu-jitsu.
This is what I mean. You can't just go by another team's program. It's you're never going to be a standout. You're just going to be mimicking another team. I just think you should. For me as a personal coach, it's like a chef. When you've got a top chef, they could come up with a series of meals to their restaurant that no other chef is doing because they understand about flavors and they experiment, they try new things, they have new ideas because look at all the different ingredients of the world. It's huge. So of course there can be new meals that will be. MMA's in that such development. I think a lot of the style of it has been played out, but I think the nuances for which are becoming so much more important to stand out amongst all these incredible athletes, incredible teams, incredible nutritionalists. To stand out, I think you've got to be thinking slightly out the box and keep coming up with surprises. And you've got to have the edge somewhere, haven't you? You've got to be doing something slightly different. And I'd like to really say we do that. I do say, I'll get people around and say, hey, look, I'm working on this top half guard position. I think this could be coming into trend at some point. I'm not going to say what it is because I want it to. And so we work our grappling very, very slightly different to how it's traditionally done, I guess you would say, because grappling in MMA is really different, particularly when you're on top or receiving it underneath. Things change, things different because you can strike. Like you don't have to fully pass a guard. You could go into a partial knee cut position, stop there and just ground and pound from there. You don't have to knee cut past to completion because there's actually more available escapes for that person. You know, just kind of get what I mean. That's, so I like looking at things like that. I'm constantly, even if I'm making my breakfast in the morning, I'll be thinking ideas about partial guard passing, where like, oh, you don't have to complete a pass there, and I'll be obsessed with that for 3 or 4 days or 3 or 4 weeks. And what I do is I have little epiphanies and I write them down in my book. I think I showed you one of my books before. I can't remember. I've got it here, like as an example. Like I got, sometimes this is like random ideas, but I mean, like, so I'll have ideas and I'll write them. I'll jot them down randomly. Yeah. Or I have a diary
and this is all martial arts stuff, is it?
Yeah, so some of it is just thoughts about the theories of life. But yeah, and I get ideas, new ideas about cage craft, and you could talk about ring craft for boxing.
Right, okay. Is this where you're sort of positioning someone in the cage?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we call it location. So you hear us in the corners saying location. Now, just the word location, the fighters are educated to know whether it means that they're in a positive location or they're in a negative, get the hell out. And so sometimes we say location. They know they squeeze their opponent back and they know what combinations that means that it opens them up to. And so, yeah, we're quite big on that because, again, you've got to try and have something as an edge. So, like, you know, a double leg out in the open might have a certain value out of 100 of 60 out of 100. But doing a double leg at just the right bit where you press them up against the cage in a way that they can't sprawl will make it 80 out of 100 in its value. So just because of the cage craft, just understanding about location of that double leg. But if you shoot that double leg late and you don't get your hands joined and you hit the cage, then you can't chain wrestle so well. You know, the cage actually is helping them stay up rather than hampering them. You know, I don't mind giving this secret up because it's probably not a secret to other top coaches, but you know, you shoot a double leg out in the open, you have the risk of being sprawled. You shoot it too close up against the cage, you're not going to get your hands together, you probably have to go and chain to a single, you're going to have to get quite physical and quite tired there, and they've got loads of ways of countering and turning you on the cage. But if you shoot your double at the right location where their back foot is within 3 feet or a meter of the cage and you shoot in, they can't sprawl, and you link your hands, well, they're going to go down. That's an example of like location, just with a double leg, and you can do that with all sorts of circumstances of techniques that are attacking, striking.
That's really, I think so many people don't understand. Like, I get the fortunate pleasure of being able to sit across from people who are unbelievably knowledgeable in their field. I think like a lot of people when they're getting into the sport they wouldn't understand like that is how deep you go into the thought of what someone's doing. They just watch a fight and it's like, oh, they're just going at it in a cage. But all those little details at the highest level, when you're maybe battered, a bit bruised, maybe you got a cut on your eye and you're starting to think about all that stuff. It's such a complex sport.
Yeah, absolutely that. And then for the coach's perspective, when you're a corner and when a fight's really stressful, we're also performing under pressure performance as well. Because sometimes when we're under pressure, I mean, you can get lost in like the difficulty of and you don't have the answers. Because you're like, we got to perform under pressure too, to come up with always the fighters performing the A plan, the B plan, the C plan. You know, sometimes I've said to Jordan, listen, you know, that's not working. We've got to go. We've got to get this guy down now, or whatever, you know, the case may be. You know, you've got to see where there's hope in that match, which is losing in a particular style. And you've got to know how to switch it up. You can't just say, oh, you're losing the striking, you've got to you've got to shoot. You can't just say that. You've got to be like, okay, look, clearly we're losing the striking. This will make him less effective. His lead leg, he's really deep on his lead leg. You've got to pick up on the single to chain in for the double and the hips. Do that, target that lead leg. As an example, so you've got to give them the clear path of how you can change the way the trajectory of that fight's going. And so, yeah, performing under pressure as a coach is you know, another skill that you can't try to acquire. Not always a straightforward, easiest thing to do.
You said something earlier which was quite interesting for me because I'm actually a chef right at the moment. So I want to make it what I can do full time. I'd love to be able to do that, but at the moment I have to work a job so I can live life still. And I work for a chain, which I probably shouldn't say the name of, so I won't. But and because it's a chain, there's a lot of like spec sheets, and you have to do everything to like spec and that. And then you get certain people who like try and tell you, oh, you have to do it this way. And I'm like, yeah, but I know this way works. But for me, I've always done something this way. Something as simple as cooking fucking spinach, right?
Yeah.
Like, I like to do it in a pan with some butter, a little bit of salt, done, right? They're like, no, put it in the microwave, it's quicker.
Right.
And I'm like, right, okay, but for me, like, it doesn't work that way. It's actually quicker for me to do it my way.
Yeah.
Because the way my brain pathway works is just let me do it that way.
Yeah.
But they won't let you do it that way.
Right.
And that can relate back to being a fighter, in that sometimes you might get a coach being like, no, you have to do it this way.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that balance of letting a fighter express themselves in their own way versus how you would like them to do it?
Yeah, I get these conversations mainly with the higher level of fighters. I could have any of the top pros saying, oh, you teach doing this technique that way. I found when I do it like this, it works a little better for me. I'm like, listen, if it's working for you, what can I say to that?
Yeah.
And keep working it. If there's something really structurally wrong with it, I can give my points and reasonings why don't do it that way, because eventually this is going to happen. I can say that to the lower end of students. So they're like, oh, I'm getting the arm bar like this. What do you think? It ain't quite like how you taught it. I'm like, oh, that's because you're doing it on another beginner. But an advanced level guy, they're just going to turn out. Yeah. And it's not going to fare well to you. You kind of got to do this because of this reason, that reason, that reason. So yeah, and again, when I talk about balance, you always hear me talking about this. A relationship with your fighter is a balance to not offend and not push them away from your coaching ideas, because then the relationship begins to break down. It is to be a little bit malleable, as long as they can give good reasons why they want to do something the way they do, and they can convince me of that, I'm all good to go with it. You got to remember, a coach and a fighter is a relationship. And with all relationships, even with your wife, your girlfriend, your fiance, a friendship relationship, a relationship with your father, your brother, your sister, there's got to be some form of compromise. And that keeps the balance. It keeps the peace. And sometimes you've got to be there. Certain things, like opinions and morals, don't burp at the table. Just don't do it. It's rude. It might be funny with your mates, but when you're with me, just don't do it. When you're with my other family, my friend, don't do it. So sometimes a coach has got to be hardline on their ideas, structurally, but there's got to be some kind of malleability in it somewhere when he's dealing with a relationship with a fighter, because trust me, fighters get triggered. They're strong-minded individuals, right? That's why they're achieving the sport they do. They have very strong personalities in their own right. These are like, I suppose you could say, I'm the lion at the top, and these are the cubs coming up, and eventually they're going to want to take my crown. It'll be like that. I don't want to get in a fracas with these guys. Sometimes I've had to step in the cage and get quite fruity with someone, and is that the right term? I don't know. I've had to get quite fresh with someone. I'm like, no, hey, I don't agree with what. That's enough, and I've had to put my foot down with it. But you have to pick your time. You have to make sure you can back it up to give your reasoning why I'm correct. Not always easy.
I guess like any good relationship where I guess you're essentially like the leader in the relationship. You kind of also have to earn that respect, right?
Yeah, to a point.
Like it's not something that's just given.
Yeah. After this particular incident I'm talking about, I every now and then, not all the time, when the motivation is high, I get everyone round. We all put a hand in hand and go, "Real good work, guys. No training ain't always easy, ain't always straightforward. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, BST. We can do all this motivational." I got everyone round, and when the mood's right, I can give them a little speech. I just say, "Listen, guys. I could be that weak coach. I could be that yes man to you, and you stand up to me and didn't like some of the coaching the little digs I was making at you when I'm coaching you. I said, I'm here to parent you sometimes, and sometimes you're not happy with what your mum and dad says, but they do it out of the love and wanting to get the best out of you." And I said, listen, I could be that weak guy. I said, but you're going to respect me? You're going to want to train with that guy? I said, sometimes I'm going to step up and I'm going to be a real man, and I'm going to show you leadership, and and you can make a choice. You either stay under that team, or you can go elsewhere with someone that perhaps going to crumble to your demands and your complaints. Sometimes I've had to bark and bite at the same time. Yeah. And but it's very few and far between, I'm pleased to say. Oh, well. Sometimes you need to do that, and that's why I get the team around to say, look, me and you just now, we had a bit of beef, right? And what did I say to you? I said this, and I called it out for everyone to see, to show I'm not ashamed, I'm not embarrassed, and I'm not going to hide behind what just happened, and to put it out there to them that hey, I am a leader. You can trust in me. I'm going to make assertive decisions, and it's always done from my heart for the best of you. I don't always get it right, but together we can make as many right decisions as possible to get you where you want to be and where I want you to be. And that's quite important.
I guess it speaks a lot about the person's character in that moment as well. If you say you can make the choice to either go somewhere where they'll pander to you, or
sometimes it gets strained, and hence I keep going back to this little mutiny we had. These particular fighters wanted to do it their way, and it just was not the right way. There has to be a point. Until you get up to a certain level, you can't really fight against what the coach says, because you know they're just at an amateur level. They just don't know. It's a little bit like this in BJJ. I've had people that go from blue, just about to get their purple, and they leave, and then I'm like, oh, where's so and so? Oh, they saw that you gave a purple belt to another guy, and he taps him out, and he's not happy he didn't get a belt, so he's just left and gone somewhere else, or give up training.
Wow.
I'm like, are you kidding me? You're kidding me? I said, but that guy that he taps out is like, he's 20 years older and 15 kilos lighter. But they make judgments, you know, people are so caught up on their egos and get sold on these belts so much. And what was my point of even saying about this?
But I'm not sure. Like we're talking about like the character of someone and choosing to go somewhere where it's easier.
My point was with certain fighters, sorry to get back on the point, was that you know, he is just a blue belt trying to get his purple belt. I've been black belt for many, many years. And again, I don't want to get tired. I've been training him many, many years. It doesn't even matter about the belt. Surely I know better to know whether you're reaching that level or not. So let me decide whether you need the belt or not yourself. Yeah. Because trust me, there's some personalities that you'll come across. They'll be a black belt within a year. And they'll bleed it. The conversation right at the beginning. Some people say, oh, I'm the best. Or we're the best team. You know, you stop yourself from learning. You hamper yourself from learning and progressing if you think you're already there. Yeah.
Nice. Danny, thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, I talk a lot. No, Brad.
No, it's good. It's good. That's what we're doing here anyway, right? We're having a chat.